It is official. Aaron Glenn will be the New York Jets' next head coach after days, after weeks of speculation. It is official. And, a lot of buzz surrounding who will be on his coaching staff is underway. A lot to get into all coming up here on a Wednesday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk, joined by Jet Nation's Dylan Terreman.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk, Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. A lot to get into. It's official. Aaron Glenn is the New York Jets' next head coach. The GM job still remains uncertain. It was trending towards Lance Newmark being the team's next GM. However, the Jets are still conducting second rounds of interviews. They brought back Darren Mogi of the Denver Broncos for a second interview, Trey Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals, while Newmark is still competing for that job. I appreciate you all tuning in. Smash the like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Appreciate all your supports. Don't forget about our membership raffle. Every membership you gift gets you a raffle ticket, Garrett Wilson signed mini helmet, Winkerbet signed football. The prizes we're raffling off for this month. I'm going to start by saying this. This show, we were supposed to have Mike Westoff, an absolute legend in Jets history, the best special teams coordinator in Jets history, one of the best special teams coordinators in NFL history. We had it planned out. I spoke to his team several times today. It was perfect. There was the report speculating him that he was going to be potentially in play as the Jets' next special teams coordinator. But unfortunately, about an hour and a half before the show starts, we received unfortunate news stating that he had to cancel for reasons, quote, out of his control. I put out a tweet for it. I'll pull it up on the screen here. I went a little crazy. People are now here it is. I put out a tweet addressing the situation, and a lot of fans are now speculating, wow, is he gonna be the Jets' next special teams coordinator? All the comments are indicating that way. I hope Mike is hired by the Jets. We are now scheduled to have him on right before the Super Bowl. Hope all is well with Mike. I just wanted to get on and address that, just because I know how you got thumbnail was made. I had to change it, so I just wanted to get on and address that quickly. But let's bring on our guest for today's show. He covers the New York Jets for Jet Nation, one of the best New York Jets reporters, writers out there. Our guy Dylan Terreman joins us on the program. DT, we had you on towards the end of 2024. Was your first appearance on the program. Big hit. We stayed in touch, and here you are again. How you doing?
Yeah, man, I'm so glad to be on again. Second time in just like what it feels like a month. So happy that we've been able to, create this little partnership for your show. And I'm happy to be on, and tons of news today, of course. And I'm glad you hyped up Mike Westoff to have me then appear on your screen, because
you're just as good, Dylan.
The fans are going to be so hype, and then they get me. So you're stuck with me and my opinions instead. But super happy to be on with you, and tons of news, tons of more news that could potentially break as we're even doing this show. So everything's in motion now, but we have some answers finally.
Dylan, I guess where I'm going to start is the Jets officially naming Glenn the head coach. This is something we've been speculating for weeks, potentially months. As right after the Jets fired Robert Saleh, I tabbed Aaron Glenn a front runner for this position. Thoughts overall on the hiring? I've been anticipating for weeks. I've been on board with it simply because I don't think the candidates available once Mike Vrabel was hired, I don't think there were too many appealing candidates really on the market for the Jets to covet. So, Aaron Glenn, former Jet, strong ties with the organization. A lot of the fan base seems to like him. I'm on board with AG as of now.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. When the search first started, I want to say he was roughly fifth, maybe sixth on my rankings of guys. That included Todd Monken, Mike Vrabel, Joe Brady, Liam Cohen, names of that nature. So clearly, as you got down to it and the interviews happened and they weren't talking to the offensive names that I preferred specifically, then I started to pivot my rankings and they started becoming more fluid. Aaron Glenn then bumped up near the top, if not at the top, shortly after that, because I realized he was the most qualified of the guys that were on the list. I didn't prefer an Arthur Smith or a Matt Nagy, Steve Spagnuolo, Mike Loxley. I didn't like any of those names, so I did prioritize Aaron Glenn at that point. He and Brian Flores were kind of neck and neck for a little bit. Josh McCown made a late push when I realized that he wasn't coming with Brian Flores. That report shifted a lot of things for me. And then it was Glenn, McCown, Flores coming down to the final stretch. And Glenn, to me, just speaks like a head coach. He has that, that bravado to him where he's just going to take control. Yeah, he's going to take control of the locker room. So to me, he had that edge over the other candidates, but I could have been, not swayed in other ways, but I think he was my one that I wasn't putting all my eggs into, but I was very, very happy when the deal got done. And now the curveball of the GM, I think, is the also alluring part of him, because I wasn't that enticed with Lance Newmark being the guy just because he had a tie with him. I think you need alignment, but I don't think you need to just bring a guy because he's your guy. So maybe the Jets are pivoting to a new direction, and I think that's an interesting curveball.
You mentioned Newmark there. That's who I want to get into next, Dylan. You bring on Chris Spielman. You bring on Mike Tannenbaum to help assist with these searches. Two former general managers who were really solid at their craft for a long amount of time, had sustainable success in this league. I was expecting, boom, you get some exciting general manager candidates in here. Whether it's Thomas Dimitroff, you kind of hit that off with a bang. Someone who's a ton of GM experience, drafted 11 Pro Bowlers. You look at him and he's had so much success over his career as an executive. Another one, Jim Nagy, who I wasn't too high on at the time, but still an intriguing name out there for the Jets to look at. The Senior Bowl director, obviously, Dylan, you'll be down in Mobile in just a few days. Newmark does not get me excited whatsoever. I've said that the past few days, and I was talking in current tense. I was speaking as he was going to be the Jets' next general manager, and it was trending that way. I expected these two to get announced today. It was only Glenn who got announced. Look, he was with the Lions for 26 years. He was with the Commanders. Dylan, it is so hard to evaluate an executive who has never been a general manager before, because you don't know how much say they have. I think the perfect example is Mike Borgonzi with the Chiefs. How much of was it him who drafted Patrick Mahomes, or was it Brent Veach and John Dorsey? It's just so hard to evaluate an executive who has never been a general manager before. So I'm not big on Newmark, and quite frankly, these other two names I'm not very excited on, whether it's Darren Moogie with the Broncos. He's been with them since 2012. He's their assistant GM. He doesn't really get me too exciting. And then Trey Brown, I had him in my C tier in my GM rankings. I didn't have Moogie in there because he was interviewed after those rankings came out. I had him in my C tier. He's interesting. Former cornerback. God, cornerback or cornerback. He was a former cornerback. And he's had stints in the XFL, the AAF, I think it was. He's had experience as an executive outside the NFL, senior personnel executive with the Bengals currently. All three of these names, none of them really get me excited. I was expecting some fun names, Dylan, to be finalists for this job. Mike Greenberg, Alec Halaby, Thomas Dimitroff. Those were my top three names. And looking at these three guys now, none of them get me excited whatsoever. None of them have any experience whatsoever. And even though they don't have experience, their backgrounds aren't quite captivating either.
No, that's absolutely a fair opinion to have. I think GM was the always skeptical version of Newmark and Glenn that I didn't necessarily agree with. I think 5 days ago, I put out a rankings when Borgonzi was hired to the Titans and just gave a list of my guys that I wanted after Borgonzi because he was probably my top guy. And Dimitroff was number one. And then second was Trey Brown. And I need to preface this by saying, all based on vibes. GMs, like you said, executives are very hard to evaluate, and you don't know who did what in what organization. So this is all based on vibes. But Dimitroff was number one after Borgonzi, and then it was Trey Brown, Alec Halaby, Mike Greenberg. So a lot of the names that you're hitting on, and then Brian Gain, and then my honorable mention the only reason I have an honorable mention in Lance Newmark was because of the ties to Aaron Glenn. So I threw him in there as an honorable mention, but he would have been like 7th, if not 8th on my list. Moogie didn't make my list. I'm not really intrigued by the fact that he started as a scouting intern in 2012 and worked his way up. I'm glad that people like him and have promoted him quickly. I think that's a good thing for him, but this is also a business of who you know and not what you know. So did he rise through the ranks because of who he knew and who knew him? Obviously, George Payton and Sean Payton, both with the Broncos, their GM and head coach respectively, have said glowing things about him. But Brad Holmes and Adam Peters have said glowing things about Lance Newmark. That doesn't necessarily sway me. It makes me happy that people around the league view him as a well-respected person. But I was also fed that Rex Hogan was a well-respected person in the league, and he currently is without a job. So I think it's hard to speculate based on who says what about him around the league. We have to just go by the resumes. And to me, Trey Brown, he had success in New England. He started there as a scout. He was there for 3 years. Pretty sure they made the Super Bowl 1, if not 2 times when he was there. Not saying it's his, doing, but he saw a championship run with the Patriots. Then he moves over to the Eagles, continuing as an area scout, then becomes the assistant director of college scouting, then promoted to just full-time director of college scouting. So he's there for 6 seasons. They win the Super Bowl while he's there. 2 franchises, 2 Super Bowl runs for Trey Brown. Then you go and he does the AAF thing and the other
XFL.
leagues, the Battle XFL. Thank you. The Battlehawks and the Birmingham Iron. Comes back with the Bengals as a scout. Now as the senior personnel executive. Guess what? Cincinnati went to the Super Bowl in his time there. So it's not to just say that he's the reason, but he's seen 3 different franchises go on championship runs. They didn't, two out of the 3 didn't even win them. And maybe the Patriots did. And I'm misremembering the years that they won those Super Bowls, but he's seen what it takes to be a championship level executive, everything at 3 different stops. So to me, I put him up on my list higher than the other guys. Hallaby, he's the analytics guy from Philly. So
Yes.
it intrigues me that he's from analytics, but I don't know if I love all the reports that we saw about him, maybe rustling some feathers in Philadelphia's draft room, making decisions and bringing in rankings that nobody really aligned with or had any congruency on. So that to me, it's a positive and a negative because I do like analytics, but that's why I leaned towards Dimitrov to begin with, because he had the analytics background after being the GM. So we had the experience of being a GM plus the analytic ties. So based on Brown and Moogie, I would have to sway in Brown's favor heavily right now, but that's not to say that if they hired Moogie, I would hate it. And I would just, be negative about it. Which people need to stop being negative about these hires, by the way.
I agree. Yeah, I'm with you there. I'll say this about Hallaby. I think analytics is the future of the NFL. We've pretty much seen it take over NFL front offices as of late, but I think there's still something to be said for, weighing in on the eye test. I don't want someone who's fully analytical like Alec Hallaby and who know nothing related to film. And then I don't want someone who's so film reliant like John Robinson, who is so stubborn and refuses to use analytics whatsoever. So I think there needs to be a fair balance in between the two. Dylan, I'm going to move over to the names that have been kind of, murmurings we've heard of potential OC and DC special teams coordinator candidates around the league for Aaron Glenn. I'm going to pull up a tweet here from Jordan Schultz suggesting these are the names to look out for. Here it is. Let's go full screen. He says, sources say Aaron Glenn is busy assembling his staff with the New York Jets, which includes the following targets: Steve Wilkes as DC, Mark Brunell, Chris Banjo as special teams coach, former Bears interim head coach Thomas Brown, former Chiefs head coach Tom Haley, Mike Westoff, should he come out of retirement. Dylan, I'll kind of start at the top there with defensive coordinator Steve Wilkes, interim head coach, head coaching experience. He went 3-13 as full-time head coach with the Cardinals for 1 season, and then he went 6-6 as an interim. Ton of defensive coordinator experience. The Panthers, their organization seems to really like Wilkes. He's an intriguing name who has a lot of experience for the DC job. Mark Brunell, a familiar face, backup quarterback for Mark Sanchez. He's been with the Lions since 2021 as their quarterback coach, where Jared Goff has really, his career is essentially been revitalized over the past few seasons. Chris Banjo as a special teams coach. I'm going to be honest, I don't know a ton about Banjo, but he's certainly a seasoned name for that job. Former Bears interim head coach Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown was their offensive coordinator this past season before being elevated to interim head coach after the dismissal of Matt Eberflus. He's intriguing. Former Chiefs head coach Todd Haley. He's been a coach in this league, I think, since the late 90s or something. 19-26 record as a head coach. An experienced guy. Intriguing name for the head coach job, and you know him well. He was supposed to come on the show tonight. Mike Westoff, should he come out of retirement? Out of those names, Dylan, for the special teams coordinator, I'm hoping it's Mike Westoff. For offensive coordinator, I would probably say Thomas Brown out of those guys, and DC, Steve Wilkes was the only choice there. Thoughts on that overall list?
Yeah, if those are the names that we have to pick from, I would definitely lean Thomas Brown, OC. I think Mark Brunell probably has what it takes to be an offensive
He doesn't have
coordinator,
enough experience, though.
but I would prefer him to maybe be the quarterback's coach or the pass game coordinator. So, yeah, Thomas Brown, and he's such a hard evaluation, even though coaches are a bit easier to evaluate than executives, just because Caleb Williams' play style is so unique. And what they did in Chicago obviously was a mess all season. So it's very hard to evaluate. Now, they had good talent around Caleb Williams on the offense, but when the quarterback doesn't get to the back of his drop and just throw the pass, the timing of the entire offense is very, strained. So it's hard to get a true evaluation without going back and watching all those games, which quite frankly, I'm not going to do for the Bears. So Thomas Brown to me is the intriguing name there. And then Steve Wilks, that's literally a home run to me. Mike Kay is a Panthers reporter on Twitter. Been following him for a couple years since I lived in South Carolina. And he had a lot of good things to say about Steve Wilks, especially during his time as the interim. And he went 6-6, like you said. And then he had a great stint as DC in Carolina where I believe Jeremy Chin had his breakout seasons. Who is a player that I've always loved, and I thought the Jets should have pursued in free agency when he was available a couple seasons ago. So that's an intriguing one to me. And I thought that regardless of who the hire was, it seemed like it was going to be a first timer. So I wanted a coordinator of any type with experience being a head coach. And Steve Wilks is perfect for that. So the fact that you get Glenn and Wilks, I like that. As far as the special teams, obviously I'm leaning Westoff. We gotta figure out we gotta figure it out. If you get the joke.
Yeah,
and we got to get Mike Westoff to the New York Jets once again. That would be a great fitting end to his career, to have him come back with the Jets and play out, coach out the rest of his days in New York. Honestly, I think that would probably mean Brant Boyer is just, demoted to assistant special teams coordinator because
I think he's out. I think he's
Westoff
out.
drafted Brant Boyer. So if Brant Boyer stays, Mike Westoff, if Mike Westoff comes, then I think Brant Boyer stays. But Chris Banjo was a player in the early 2000s, 10s era. Yeah, 2013 was his first season. Yeah, and he just stopped playing in 2022, according to Pro Football Reference. So that's a guy who knows where the sport is going. There's a lot of special teams coordinators that I don't know too much about. He would fit that bill. So he's not my top choice, but again, a guy that I can't, dismiss, so to speak. Darren Rizzi was another name I saw. It's not in that tweet from Jordan Schultz. But I think Rizzi, if he doesn't get a head coaching job, which they're calling for him in New Orleans, Alvin Kamara wants him as his head coach. So we'll see Rizzi about special teams. And then on offense, there's still the rumor that Josh McCown might come. So I'm not holding on to all the hope that Josh is coming, but all the other names that we saw for OC, Clint Kubiak,
I love
Nick
Clint,
Caley,
yeah.
Scott Turner didn't really do it for me because kind of the same thing as Thomas Brown. Like, you come from a weird team, had a lot of turmoil this year. I didn't really get to see enough of your offense at full capacity to see what it was like. So Scott Turner to me was a little bit of but Kubiak, if you could land Kubiak and Wilks and either Banjo or Westoff, I think that's A plus, B, A minus at the worst type of coaching staff for Aaron Glenn.
A lot to unpack there, Dylan. I guess where I'll start was you mentioned Westoff there and Boyer potentially being demoted to assistant special teams coordinator. Something I wouldn't be surprised with if Westoff were to come out of retirement and join Aaron Glenn's staff is maybe an assistant head coach role, the role he's been with for the past 3 seasons with the Broncos. He's maybe that right-hand man to Aaron Glenn, someone who's seasoned, someone who coached Glenn for a few seasons over with the Jets early 2000s, late 90s. So I think that's an interesting role to look out for. You mentioned Clint Kubiak. Dylan, I put him on my head coach to avoid list, but if he's going to take a parallel leap from New Orleans, quite frankly, it's not guaranteed that he will be there with potentially a whole new Mickey Loomis is still their GM, but a new head coach coming into the building. He's probably going to want to bring in his whole staff. 38 years old, son of Gary Kubiak, Super Bowl winning head coach. Younger, innovative offensive mind, his play calling experience. I'd take Kubiak all day. Josh McCown is a name who's been tossed around. I still think I don't know why he would want to leave Minnesota unless it's for a head coaching job. I think he's in a great scenario right now, whether it's helping revitalize Sam Darnold's career or now he's the opportunity to help mentor a young buck and JJ McCarthy, who's going to be coming off knee surgeries. It's going to be interesting to see what the Vikings do there with him. That's where I am right now with all these OCDC special teams coordinator candidates. Smash the like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I appreciate all your support. Get your questions in the chat. We'll be sure to bring them up on the screen to Tom so Dylan can answer them. I know we only have a few minutes left. If you want to call into the show, click the pinned comment in the chat. Smash the like. Subscribe to the channel, completely free. Check out our Discord and merch store down below. That would be greatly appreciated. Let's see. Where are we? Jets Worldwide comes in and says, what happens to Flores? I know, Dylan, we have about Well, do you have you for about what 12 more minutes?
Yeah, 15, 20. That's fine. Yep.
All right, 15, 20, perfect. So we'll get through a few questions, then we'll go to the calls. Gary, I see you backstage. If anyone wants to call in, just click the pin comment. We'll get you up
Absolutely.
on the screen. Jets Worldwide wants to know what happened to Flores here. I think Dylan, this is really interesting. Head coaching experience. There were the rumors of him. Dylan?
Yep, I'm here. You got me?
One?
You got me?
Okay, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, you
Everything froze
you
for a sec. Yeah, that was.
We're there. Yeah, we're there. So back to what I was saying. Flores is certainly interesting. He was a coach for 3 seasons within the division, 24-25 record. He's with the Vikings now as their defensive coordinator. I could see why the Jets might be a little concerned with the alienating players, Ryan Fitzpatrick speaking out against them. I thought he was a good enough candidate to earn a second interview. I'm surprised he didn't. Flores was certainly not my number one option. McCown was my number one option for the head coaching job. Just I could go on. Him and Joe Brady were my 2 top names among the guys they interviewed. Him, Joe Brady, Bobby Slowick were probably my top 3. So I still think Flores deserved a second interview for the job. It's quite confusing on what the Jets did here.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what transpired with the whole Flores thing, but he started out very high on my list as well. Maybe the whole Grigson ties kind of, deterred the Jets because it seemed like it was very quickly reported that Grigson got a call back from the Jets saying that they were not going to pursue him for a second interview. So maybe they just were completely turned off by Grigson, and wherever that report came from, whether it was Flores or Grigson himself who started that, like, hey, I'm going to be Flores's GM when he leaves to be a head coach. Maybe that kind of hurt his chances. I think McCown not being his OC for sure hurt his chances. But like you said, I think the alienating of Tua, some of the players having a rift with him, it's not necessarily a vibe that a lot of teams are ready to take on. I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. To me, the Flores thing that probably deterred me the most was the amount of offensive coordinators he had. And if you're going to sell me on the vision that Brian Flores is coming here with Josh McCown as his offensive coordinator, to me, that just means you're going to have to find a new offensive coordinator within a couple years. Not saying that Josh would be amazing at this job, and we're not going to do the whole Mike LaFleur thing again, where we say he's going to get poached the day he's hired, but that's the trajectory for Josh McCown, is he's going to be a head coach in short order. So to me, having Flores need basically 2 OCs in the matter of a couple of years, that also deterred me. So he went very quickly from like 2 to 4 on my rankings once it all got down to it. The Jets obviously never called him back. I don't know exactly how the interview went the first time. Everything seemed like it was okay. But it only takes, one little slip up in the meeting or one thing that he says that Woody doesn't vibe with, and the whole thing could be turned off. So I thought he was certainly qualified to get another head coaching gig. I don't think he's going to land one. It doesn't seem like anybody is in the market for him. So at worst, Minnesota gets to keep their defensive coordinator, and their head coach gets a big payday. So they're pretty happy, I'd say.
I meant to pull this up at the top of the show. A $5 super chat from our guy Chris J. Chris, appreciate your support. 2 more raffle tickets for you. You have 35 tickets this month. He's a Glenn fan. Glenn Z, hashtag AG31. I will say, Dylan, the pulse of the fan base after this hire, it seems to be mixed. The veteran fans, the Joe Beningos, the Mike Francesas. I wouldn't particularly call him Mike Francesa a fan of the Jets, but you know what I'm saying. The older reporters, the older fans don't seem to like going with the first time defensive mind. But we like it, and a lot of people in the chat like it, which I think is a good sign here.
I want to know what Mike Greenberg's thoughts are, because apparently he's the voice of the Jets fans apparently on my television. I don't like that Mike Greenberg speaks for Jets fans.
Okay.
So no, I don't care what his opinion is. I honestly hope he doesn't like Aaron Glenn, because then that means that he's probably going to have more success. But yeah, I don't understand one way or the other. Like, I get it if you're in love because he was with the Jets and he was a good player and he came up under Parcells. There's tons of positives, tons of negatives too. So it's kind of just a wait and see game with Glenn, but I'm going to give almost any coach right now the benefit of the doubt, because I think that what we had clearly wasn't working. And like Woody said, he didn't trust the regime. Now it looks like he trusts his guy. So Aaron Glenn has his trust, so he'll have mine for now.
Smash the like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Appreciate all your support. Get your questions, comments, thoughts, memberships, super chats in. If you want to call in, click the pinned comment in the chat. Go over to the phone lines. Let's go out to our guy, Gary, who's up on the program, rocking the Nets jersey. Gary,
looks like he's muted.
D'Lo jersey? You're
muted, Gary.
Yeah, it's from 2018. Got to pull back
Wow.
out. Yeah, had my it was stored away in storage with my LaDainian Tomlinson jersey and my Tim Tebow jersey.
Oh
So
boy.
Tough
we
loss
got-
last night, Gary. 4-point loss to the Knicks.
It's for the
Tough.
best though, right? Are you
Tank
pro
is on.
tank?
Go
Yeah,
Heat.
I'm a Gary. Obviously, I'm a big Nets fan. At this point, I've honestly, I'll be all honesty, I haven't watched the past 3 games. I've just been so busy. So, from what I've seen from a scoreboard standpoint, they pushed the Knicks to the final buzzer. They got annihilated by the Thunder. It's like, hey, I would take a what's his name, Trey Johnson, Igor Cooper, Dylan Ace. I think it's good for the future of the team.
they'll. I still think they're gonna end up with Dylan Harper.
I think he's one of their best options.
I think the NBA lottery is rigged, and I think I think Cooper is going to Utah with Danny Ainge, and I think Dylan Harper is going to the Nets, and Ace is going to go to someone in the middle. I don't know, maybe New Orleans or something like that. But I've had a feeling all year that Nets, the Rutgers kid, Don Bosco prep, stayed in Jersey. Nets fan as a kid, despite his dad being a world champion with the Lakers and Lakers and the Bulls. He's sticking with the Nets. I think that guy's going to end up in the Nets. I think Cooper Flag is going to go to Utah because Ainge can make him a winner right away, just like Wembanyama I knew was going to San Antonio because it makes sense with Popovich. He'll get him there and they'll be stars and competitive quickly. So that's how I see that going. But to get to the Jets, I was not on the Aaron Glenn bandwagon.
You had Ron Rivera high on that.
I did. I want an experienced coach. I wanted Flores. I wanted Vrabel or Flores. I guess Flores was my one, but those two guys were really interchangeable for me. I think it's just a matter of like when you find what you're looking for, you stop searching. And I think Glenn impressed them so much that we could basically, as long as we can get him to commit, we can stop the search, right? Like we found what we want. If you listen to Glenn, and I wasn't for hiring him, but he's a very smart guy. You can tell he's sharp as a tack, right? Like he's a smart guy. I compiled this list of coaches he played for, starting in college with R.C. Slocum, legendary Texas A&M coach, Pete Carroll, Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, Jack Del Rio, Sean Payton, Ted Cottrell, Mike Zimmer, Vic Fangio.
Everyone but Jack Del Rio, I love on that list.
These are great.
And Dom Capers, correct? Dom Capers.
Yeah, Capers too. Yeah. These are great football minds, right? So a smart guy is going to be a sponge. It seems like I made the comparison to J.J. Redick, right? J.J. Redick played for Coach K, Jeff Van Gundy, Doc Rivers, Rick Carl. It just goes on and on and on and on, right? So it's like, how did he get that job so quickly? Well, he's a smart guy that just absorbed from all these great minds. And maybe that's what we have in Glenn, right? You listen to Glenn, he's very impressive. That's why, like, when he went to the interview, it's like, oh, that guy interviews well, right? Because he's super smart. Like, he's super smart. The Jet fans love him. He comes from a winning background to a degree. I know the Lions haven't been good that whole time, but they've been good the last 2 years. So I'm trying to get on board with this. I want an experienced coach. I want a Flores, a guy that could like just get the ship back on course and stop it from sinking. But maybe Aaron Glenn is that guy. I was a fan. I know you guys are too young to remember Glenn, the player. Despite what the guy said on Jake's show this morning, he was not a better player than Revis. But
I heard that.
Wait, I didn't catch Dylan. I see you. Obviously, Gary, you always call in Dylan. I always see you in the chat. Wait, what? Who said what? I didn't catch the shows today. I caught the breaking news show towards the end. I didn't catch the morning show.
Someone on Jake's show this morning said that his name was Gary too, by the way, not me.
How
a different
perfect.
guy named.
Oh, is that the? I've seen him before. Have you gone on with him at the same time?
Well, just today, and he was saying that Aaron Glenn was a better cornerback than Darrelle Revis.
That is not true. Yeah, no.
Use stats and everything to back it up.
Yeah, and Glenn was a great part of that '98 team, and he was here. He was a really really good player. Like a really good player, but it's equivalent to saying D'Angelo Russell is better than Kevin Durant. It's like, whoa,
yeah, or like
I love D'Lo for that team too, but like, whoa, yeah.
Or like Jericho Cotchery is statistically better than Wayne Corbett or Wesley or Don Maynard, something like that. Jericho Cotchery is a better receiver than Don Maynard in Jets history, something like that.
It just line them up. You know, you could say
Mhm.
certain guys, Dion, had a better career than Revis, but just at their best, right? Like, we're picking sides, and you have the best version of every cornerback. To me, it's not even a question. You're taking Revis. I don't even think second place is close. Like, that's how good Revis was. He was the cornerback version to what LT did as linebacker. He was like, it was him and everybody else was second, and it wasn't close. So it's like,
Right.
look, I love Glenn too, and there's no disrespect to Glenn. He's Pro Bowler. He's a really good player. But it's like, look who you compared him to, right? That's why, like, when we drafted Sauce, I'm like, I like Sauce. And everyone's like, well, he's not Revis. Guys, nobody
He hasn't played a game.
Yeah,
is
nobody
Revis.
is. Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like saying the Bulls drafted Derrick Rose. Well, he's not Jordan. It's like, all right, guys, like, chill. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, that's not fair to put on anybody. Revis was that good. Like,
We may never see a Revis type player again. We will probably
Revis
see
was.
Aaron Glenn type players frequently at the cornerback position. So.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say Sauce Gardner has the potential to be the Aaron Glenn of the 2020.
I'm glad that he's happy.
Sauce is already better than Glenn. Was good. He was undersized. He was rough. He was rugged. He was physical as hell. He was good. I'm not trying. He was a very good player. Sauce is already better than Glenn was. Cromartie was probably better than Glenn, but that's close, right?
I'd say Cromartie is a better overall cornerback than Glenn.
I'm not.
The fact that you have to debate it proves that he's not Revis. I mean,
he's not even close to Revis.
No, that's crazy. One of one, Darrell Revis is not Aaron Glenn. Glenn was a great player. I was barely alive when he was playing. I was like infancy. I was 2-3 years old, but I've watched and I know a little bit about the Parcells stuff to know that he was an integral part of the '98 team. But other than that, he was an okay corner. People liked watching his film other than Deion Sanders because he had the technique. And I posted in the private chat for you to read, Connor, and you can share it with your chat as well. But there's
I'm going to throw it in the chat.
Ben Solak put out listing all those coaches that you named and the technique that Aaron Glenn played with and how intricate he wanted to know every little basic part of the position. And he's going to take that into the coaching aspect of the game. So there's a lot to like about it, but I agree. I would have preferred somebody who had a little bit more experience or at least an offensive guy. When it started, it was Monken and Vrabel and Cohen and Brady for me. Those were the guys that I was like, you got to just change what you've been doing historically, because I'm almost 30 years old and I've seen one offensive coach in my life, and it was the worst offensive coach we've had in our history.
That doesn't
exactly. Exactly.
He didn't deserve the job in the first place anyway.
We knew from moment one that it was not going to work. So that's the reason why I was saying let's go offense, but I can't discredit Glenn because he's a first-time defensive guy. I have to wait to see the staff. If he does land Kubiak or even McCown on that hopeful, and then, Wilkes and potentially Rizzi or Westoff as special teams, I'm cool with that. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for now.
The last thing I wanted to touch on, I wanted your guys' thoughts on this, is offensive coordinator. I was hoping for Thomas Brown. My wife is a big Bears fan.
Oh,
huge Bears fan. And when the Jets fell at 2-5 on Monday night, Sunday night against Pittsburgh, when they lost the game to Pittsburgh, the same night the Mets got eliminated, right? I said both my seasons end tonight.
The day the Jets died, yeah.
The day the Jets died, I lost to Pittsburgh. I told my wife, all right, I'm a Bears fan now. I'm gonna watch the Bears and root for the Bears with you every week for the rest, because they were 4-2 at that time.
They were.
And then they lost, 11 games in a row? Yeah, 11 games in a row.
You started right before the Hail Mary.
Yeah. That was the first game. Yeah. And but their offense was so bad for so long. Caleb went well over a month, 5 games in a bye week, so 6 weeks without scoring a touchdown, running or throwing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put Thomas Brown in, and their offense became an NFL offense. I want to at least, I know he's a dark horse, but his name was mentioned. I would like to see Thomas Brown really be considered for that OC position. I really would. He changed that offense day one.
Yeah, I could be sold on Thomas Brown. I said to Connor before you came on, I don't know what happened in Chicago. I know he was elevated after the firing of Eberflus to interim head coach, I believe, right? So everything kind of happened.
Coach, then he was OC,
and then OC.
That was a crazy story.
Everything happened super fast for him, and that's unfortunate. It's not like Ulbrich, who was in over his head because the coach got fired. It's like he got promoted twice after all this stuff happened. So everything was really snowballing for him. It's hard to evaluate the Bears because of Caleb Williams, in my opinion. So stylistically, unless I went back and watched the all 22, I would have no dog in the fight of let's not hire him or let's definitely hire him. So I could be swayed either way on a Thomas Brown. If he's, with the likes of the Kubiaks and Kayleys of the world, then yeah, absolutely, let's bring him in.
Yeah, I think Thomas Brown is interesting. 5 games of the interim. He went 1-4, but you mentioned that, Gary. The offense was immediately revitalized. The Bears organization, Ryan Poles and the ownership group had to seemingly really like him. He was promoted to the interim offensive coordinator, I think 2 weeks you guys spoke about, before he was getting the head coach before becoming the interim head coach. So I think there's a lot to like in him. I would take Clint Kubiak over him. I would take McCown if that's still a possibility. It seems like a
Yeah, I
pipe
would take
dream.
McCown too, but I don't think that's happening.
I
don't think so either.
It's like a pipe dream.
Everybody would probably take McCown at this point, I think.
Yeah,
because that's best of both worlds.
Agree. At this point, Thomas Brown's probably my number 2 option at OC, based on the names that have been floated around. Play calling experience, was a head coach for 5 games. I think I'd take him over. What's his name? Scott Cayley.
Scott Turner. I would take him over Scott Turner.
Scott Turner. Who's the Nick Cayley was the guy.
Nick Cayley from the Rams.
Yeah, I would take Thomas Brown over him.
I would take Cayley over Brown only because he comes from the McVay tree and he's a pass game coordinator as well. So there's a lot to like about that. Tight end coach doesn't bother me, but the pass game part is what I am most intrigued by.
I would potentially take Tanner Engstrand with him over Thomas Brown, but other than that, I mean, Dylan, I heard you float around was Hank Farley on your show earlier this week, the O-line coach in Detroit. Here's the thing: I'm just not a big fan of offensive line coaches becoming coordinators when they haven't been a wide receivers coach, tight ends coach. Is he the run game coordinator as well?
He was, I believe, their run game coordinator in Detroit. I can look it up real quick, but
that could be. Yeah, I'll get that up on the screen. That could be important.
He's in play for the Seattle offensive coordinator position.
Yeah.
Everything looks that way, but it looked like he wanted to bring a guy on with him. So that kind of deterred me. It's like, hey, if you don't think you could be OC without bringing somebody that you need on your coaching staff, I think that's kind of weird. So I was a little turned off by him, but he was one of the first names I connected. And I disagree. I like the O-line coach being the offensive coordinator because everything kind of flows through the offensive line. I mean, Keith Carter was our weakest positional coach on either side of the ball, in my opinion. So if you had a strength in the offensive line to the point where he's overseeing everything, then yeah, I think it's kind of we flow through the offensive line kind of vibe, and I can get with that based on the makeup of the Jets' current front 5.
The only reason I'm opposed to it, Dylan, is because I just looked at his resume. All he has here, I'll read it off to you. He played in the league from 2000 to 2010 with the Steelers, Eagles, Browns, St. Louis Rams. Here's his resume: San Diego offensive line coach 2012, San Diego State offensive line coach 2013, Vikings assistant offensive line coach 14 to 16, UCLA O-line coach 2017, Lions assistant O-line coach 18 to 19, and then since 2020 he's been their full-time offensive line coach. He doesn't have any experience as a run game coordinator too. That's the biggest thing. If that was there, because I think Breece Hall had so much potential this season. I just don't think the Jets utilized him well. I think it's as simple as that. I think he could have been in for another season where he had 1,500 all-purpose yards, nearly 1,000 rushing yards, great game receiving out of the backfield, but clearly didn't happen. Jets didn't utilize him. The offensive line was horrible. Didn't open up enough gaps for Breece overall. So, it's about building up the trenches, but at the same time, do I want to go with someone who's never called plays, someone who's never been a run game coordinator before, and has basically only been an offensive line coach since 2012, so a little over a decade. That just doesn't intrigue me enough. But Gary, I appreciate the call. You got any final thoughts?
No, that's all I got. Great work, guys. Great job. Keep it up, Connor, Dylan.
Absolutely.
Great team. Appreciate
you. Thank you.
Appreciate you hopping on. I appreciate your support on the program. Dylan, appreciate you joining me. One more thing here before we let you go. Kuka Lake Jet fan comes in with 1 month membership super chat. Kuka Lake Jet fan, I appreciate your support on the show. Seems like Kaylee tweets from Josina Anderson's account. Dylan, Josina Anderson has been getting a lot of flack recently in Jets Twitter for the way the tweets have been written, potentially favoring some coaching candidates here.
Yeah, I think she's got some robotic ghostwriters doing some favors for her with her words, because I need to put it into a 5-year-old translator because I don't understand half the words she uses in her tweets, because I don't know why she needs to do this, but every time she says moreover, I roll my eyes. It's like, can you just get to the point, please?
Most importantly, or more
Yeah.
importantly.
The financial compensation and all that, just tell us it's the money hang up. Like, it's cool. Kaylee, yeah, she was asking Rams fans for information about Nick Caley, the tight ends coach, pass game coordinator. So that kind of created a stir, just like you did, breaking the news of Mike Westoff coming to the Jets. It created the same kind of buzz. Everybody in Jets Twitter was like, oh, what do you know? What are you telling us?
Yeah.
Is he going to be our new OC? And I think it's a wait and see for the next kind of 24 hours with the staff, but I'm cool with it. Like I said, a McVay tree. I'm probably the biggest Mike LaFleur fan that still exists in Jets land. So I liked Mike LaFleur coming from that same type of Shanahan McVay tree. McVay has more 11 personnel tendencies, which make me happier as a fan because I'm not a huge fan of the 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. I like 3 wide receivers on the field at all times. I like, modeling an offense similar to like the Bengals, where they have 3 viable options, a good running back and a great quarterback. So the McVay tree is always a favorable one for me. And that's why I lean toward Clint Kubiak as well, because he was the pass game coordinator for the 49ers. So anybody with pass game coordinating experience from a successful organization, I will give the benefit of the doubt. And people can call me a very, very optimistic Jets fan, and that's fine. This is the time of year where we can't be negative all the time. So I feel like as we turn over this new leaf with Glenn and a potentially new GM waiting to see who it is, then I feel like that's what I got to do, is just be positive and wait to see the results.
Smash the like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. We appreciate all your support. Dylan, thanks so much for coming on with me. I know it's supposed to be at eight we said, and then boom, Mike Westoff had to unfortunately cancel it on us. Thank you for being flexible. Thank you for being able to slide in to 7 p.m. Follow him at Terreman on Twitter, all social media accounts. Jet Nation, you're on right after this. Go subscribe to Jet Nation. Read his work there. Subscribe to their YouTube channel. He'll be on in just a little with Glenn Naughton and the whole Jet Nation crew, recapping this crazy day in Jetland. But Dylan, appreciate you hopping on. You got any final words?
No, just excited. This time next week, I'll be sitting in Mobile, Alabama, which I thought I'd be escaping cold weather, but it looks like they have cold weather as well. So if the snow melts by next week, I'll be happy. But yeah, just excited to get down there and finally, get knee deep into the draft process. I'm like scratching the surface right now, and I'm sure I'll be back on your show before the draft, and we'll definitely chop it up with prospects. So I'm hoping to have a lot more notes filled up in my notebook after next week in the Senior Bowl.
Dylan Terreman, Connor Long, we will see you next time. JTS, Jets, Jets, Jets.